Hello, everyone, and thanks for giving us your time today for VR Download. I'm Ian Hamilton in New York, joined by David Heaney in London in the UploadVR studios as we talk about the next steps in personal computing. We're wearing Quest 3 headsets today with last generation meta avatars. We're using hand tracking and built in microphones. We've got tablets in front of us that show us the live comments when we're here in the studios, and we can interact with our audience when we're live. Thank you to our patrons for supporting the work we do over on UploadVR.com. In case this is your first time here, you can become a paying member at UploadVR.com to support our work directly. We thank our patrons in particular by name here on this podcast, and we list them on our website. That includes XR Developer News, Hollinet, Justin Corcoran, Richard Meller, Parmesan, Nick Levac, Quick Qubits, Steve Lucas, David Wyatt, DePonch, and Soul Presence. Sincerely thank you to all of you for your support. Hello to everyone out there. Please feel free to share where you're watching us from, and hello to our time travelers catching us at different speeds or times, and those of us watching us through a universal translator of some kind into their native language. David, what do we have today?
Hello, everyone. So this is going to be a relatively shorter show than usual. We'll see how it goes. Sometimes we say that and it isn't, but this time we really have to. I am currently finishing up my Meta Ray-Ban display review. It is almost done. It will be one of my longest articles ever. I have so many thoughts. I want to keep repeating what we always say at UploadVR, that there is a difference between a review and hands-on impressions. Reviews are what you do when you have a headset or glasses or whatever device in your home in use for ideally weeks, if not many days. And yeah, I've been using Meta Ray-Ban display for around a month now, daily, almost all day. And I have a lot of thoughts to bring you to. So expect that in the next sort of 28 to 36 hours or so. I'm also working on a review for the M5 Apple Vision Pro and Samsung Galaxy XR, which I now have. I just got the Galaxy XR yesterday. Again, we've published our impressions for these headsets. Now it will be answering your question. What is it actually like to use as a product? Not, getting it as an influencer and giving you a couple of bullet points and then returning it within the 14-day period, but actually owning it in a real world scenario and seeing how does it integrate into your daily life. So expect those all this month. Today, we have 5 news topics that we're going to discuss. Firstly, we will talk about Quest 3S being on sale, certified refurbished for its lowest price ever. And the 512 gigabyte proper Quest 3 also is in the same situation. So we'll tell you about the details there, and it could be a perfect chance to, grab a early holiday gift to get a friend into VR, or if you're on the fence and maybe you have a Quest 2 and haven't really thought about this generation yet and you want to jump in, this could be a good time. We'll then talk about the headset, the PC VR headset that Sharp is crowdfunding, odd decision in itself, which is quite a strange headset. It's a lightweight tethered PC VR headset. And we'll talk about why some of the design decisions around it are perplexing, to say the least. We will then discuss that important study from Cambridge and Meta researchers that somewhat confirms that retinal resolution, so the resolution beyond which the human eye cannot discern any more detail if it went higher, is actually far higher than the 60 pixels per degree value that is often cited as general knowledge in this industry. So we'll dig into that and what that means for the kind of runway of resolution for headsets over the course of decades. Then we will discuss a Meta launching a $1.5 million competition for new Quest apps and significant updates. If you are the kind of developer that loves to be in a hackathon, there's not really a huge amount of time to enter this. It's a 1 month kind of scale, but if you are the kind of developer that loves that kind of hackathon scenario of trying to put something together in a couple of weeks and you want to make some money, this could be an interesting way to do it if you think you have some innovative ideas for a Quest app or a big update. We'll talk about what big and significant means in Meta's criteria. Finally, Ian is going to tell you about his time with Logitech MX Ink for Quest and Logitech Muse for Apple Vision Pro. So MX Ink has been out for around a year now. Logitech Muse, which is basically the same thing with a couple of minor hardware differences that Ian will tell you about, but they're basically the same thing. For Apple Vision Pro, released last week alongside the M5 Vision Pro. And as Ian will tell you, at launch with Vision OS 26, there was a lot missing, but Apple has put out in the last couple of days a beta version of Vision OS, which seems to add full support. So very odd decision to launch the hardware without the OS version that truly supports it. But Ian's going to tell you all about what it's like to use these spatial styluses, and we can debate what they're actually called. Ian might call them a pencil or a pen or a wand. There's no right term. But yeah, he's basically talking about how do these work in the OS level? What's the app level support? How are developers using these? Is it a priority? And answer the question that is fundamental to this. Should you fork out the $130 or so to buy one of these things? Do you need a third track controller in addition to your two touch controllers? If you have got a Vision Pro, could this be your first track controller for your headset? Ian's going to try and give you his thoughts on that based on his time with these two styluses for these two headsets. And again, we'll debate even the term stylus.
Yeah. I'm going to see how I can thread this episode together a little bit here, because it'll be interesting to come back to that. I do have a surprise, because I found out that David technically has MX Ink support here in this studio. Now, of course, it's broken, severely broken, because he didn't actually add that support. It just it works through a compatibility layer that is ridiculous to actually do. So when we come back to that final thing, I'll pull the controller into my hand, and you'll see the MX compatibility inside of this app, which David didn't intend for it to exist. I'm seeing Colorado Springs out there, San Diego, Ohio, Andrew out there, Afro Badger, a lot of our regular viewers, Parmesan. Hello, everyone, for tuning in. It's great to see you all. It's great to chat with you. And the way I'm going to try to pull this all together is I'm going to talk about the thing that we sort of removed off of the schedule, because we're still trying to figure out how to integrate games into our discussion. It's an ongoing thing of just how do we cover what is happening in games. There is so much in such a strange number of avenues, right? You could have flat games and then everything into fully immersive VR, and there's actually a lot of content types between that. So we're still figuring all that out. And we just had Laserdance come out, or Laserdance is out today. So I did a review of Laserdance, and I encourage you to go read it. And the reason how I'm gonna thread all this together is this certified refurbished price as our first subject here. Quest 3S runs this game, right? So you have a stupid low price to actually go and try out mixed reality, room scale mixed reality. Now I didn't review it on the 3S. I ran it on the 3, and I did hand tracking only. But that's a wildly interesting moment in the space to say, oh, you can go get this game on very low cost hardware and experience something that's quite a bit different from room scale VR of the last decade.
Yeah, look, before we get into those refurbished prices, that topic, let's just say definitely go and read Ian's review of Laserdance. You could argue that the takeaway is that this is the first truly great mixed reality game that isn't just using pass-through as a background. So there are lots of great games that support VR and mixed reality in the sense that you can either be in a virtual environment or you can use your real room as the background, right? But background is the key word. There have been very few full-scale great games on Quest 3 and 3S that truly merge the physical geometry of your room with virtual content, that actually could not work without some of the features that Quest 2 doesn't have, like the ability to create this scene mesh that you can see in this debug view, like the ability to do the inside-out upper body tracking that Laserdance uses for the laser collisions. So it's a room-aware and body-aware mixed reality game. And also, it uses the depth API for occlusions, visual occlusions. So fascinating to see that we're now at the point where there is a mixed reality game where, you know, Ian, who I think has been somewhat skeptical of this idea, is now kind of saying this is like an essential mixed reality game. This is a game that you need to try on your Quest 3 or 3S.
Yeah, it's the eye opener, right? Because when the term room scale VR, right, it overpromised a little bit about what it was. Like, even though you could mark out a 5 meter by 5 meter thing or whatever, according to the Steam VR tracking base stations, in reality, you needed to clear that whole space from floor to ceiling. Here I'm actually leaning over the obstacles to kind of weave around lasers, and I'm actually like going out of boundaries that would have been contained within in just VR. And it's a powerful thing to have happen, right? Like, and then you see the lasers all hitting your actual objects around your environment, your couch. It's a powerful role play magnifier of keeping you inside that illusion of, oh, these lasers are actually here in my space. So just fantastic. And I see people out there mentioning Spatial Ops and the other games that have come before it. I mean, gosh, you think about something like Space Pirate Arena, which was a brilliant and is a brilliant piece of software that keeps you in VR over a very large place, but it's very dangerous, right? Here, what they're doing is they're giving you away, like, this is dangerous. You need to be safe, right? Like, there's still some issues here with needing to keep your space clear of obstacles. But, like, this is embracing the idea that you actually want to dodge your environment a little bit, and it's a different thing.
Yeah, Christoph is just pointing out that if you're watching this live, Laser Dance is not technically out for another 45 minutes, so that's true. You're going to have to wait a few minutes to actually get this, and it is an early access release, to be clear. And just before we move off this, for anyone who isn't familiar with the game, what is the core gameplay here? I think that it is in concept so simple, but in reality, as it progresses more complex, what makes it so great, like many great games. And the concept here is you start on one side of your room, and the objective is to get to a console panel on the wall on the other side of your room and press it. But in between you and that button are a series of patterns of lasers, you know, Tom Cruise Mission Impossible style lasers that you have to kind of crawl under and through and around. And these lasers move in different patterns and timings that you have to figure out. It's kind of a really clever, simple idea, but I think from Ian's description, in practice executed really well. And this is also, just before again we move off this, something that this game has been in development for many years. This sounds simple, but again, it's actually harder to deliver great simplicity than kind of complication when it comes to software design and game design. There's a hidden beauty in simplicity, where it's that kind of phrase of, when you've done something right, people aren't sure you've done anything at all. So I think a lot of the development of Laser Dance has just been, you know, I see a commenter asking, like, how does it adapt to different room sizes and different room shapes? Well, that's been a huge part of the years of development of this game. And I think our answer is, in 40 or so minutes, go and figure out for yourself. I think this is an essential mixed reality game.
Yeah, this dev worked an extraordinary amount to try to account for exactly that question, and you're going to have to see. So in this image that you see up here that I used for my review, I am the one who put this button on this surface in my room. I said, here, the very first thing you do when you go into this game, after you do the room scan at the system level, is you go up to the wall and say, here is where button start is. Now go to an opposite wall, and here's where your button end wall is. Then as you're going, it shows you a mapping on the floor to show you how far the laser maze is going to end up being and how difficult kind of the level is. I'm really interested to see what people do when they take this into strange rooms or larger rooms. I just threw it at my living room to see, hey, can you do this in my living room? And my first room, I just set it up on an open doorway. I set the first surface actually in an open doorway, so there was no actual physical surface I had to touch, and that's where my button was to go and press. Then it was on a physical wall on the other side. That whole setup process, that's all software made by the developer using this room scan and using their work with Meta to like make this work. So when you actually go from one side to the other, there's like a wall around the button where you're safe from the lasers, and once you exit that little circle, that's when you expose yourself to the lasers that are coming for you. It's all these ideas had to be invented more or less by this developer to make this work in this way, where you put the button on a physical wall and then you put it on another wall, and then that's where you go. David's showing the menu here where there are additional challenges that you can go do. There's not a ton of, like, you will finish the game pretty fast. but it's still doing things with a headset you've never done before in this way. You know, you play something like Dr. G's, I can't remember the name of the thing on the Magic Leap 2 device, but you had these little postage stamp field of view as this creature is going around your environment. That's kind of the closest, like it went and exited through a portal in the door. It used the environment a little bit as its backdrop. That's the closest as anyone has come to this kind of gameplay on a VR system. Oh, any questions out there about this? You're muted, David.
Oh, sorry. I'm finally out of
Oh, I got one.
myself.
I got one. Is that one on anyone's bingo cards?
Had to happen eventually. Yeah, I'm really excited to try this one out myself when I get time. I don't really have time at the moment, but yeah, it's great to see that there are mixed reality games now that really take advantage of your room, and I think it's going to be a really shareable one as well. It's one of those games like Beat Saber that you can, if someone's visiting your house, or you know, a friend, a loved one, a family member, you can just put them into the headset and they can figure out Beat Saber in seconds. People love those sort of games. I think this is the perfect example of a game where even if you don't know how to use a game controller, which is a lot of people in this world, right? You don't need to learn, oh, press this button to do this and this. You know physically how to move your body from one part of the room to another and avoid lasers. And I love this.
And press a red button with your hand.
Exactly.
Just your hand. Because I have to reinforce that hand tracking is such a big thing. It worked. I played from start to finish with hand tracking here, and it worked.
Yeah, no, I think this is great. But let's move on to talk about our topics for today. I really do think that you should go and buy Laserdance when it's available. But let's talk about our topics for today, unless anyone has any further questions before we move on.
Yeah, I'm watching everyone out there. See someone tuning in for the first time. Afro Badger says they're sold. Would love to hear what everyone thinks about this game when we get back in here next week and in the shows ahead. Games are trying, share the games that you love in our comments. We love to hear what you spend your time in with VR, like what games and what places you really go to. We love to hear that. Looks like we've got is that a donation there? Anyways, let's talk about this refurbished price, and I will keep on the comments there. And if there's anything interesting, I'll surface it through our conversation.
Yeah, let's talk about this. So you can get until the end of this week, which means 11:59 p.m. Pacific time on Sunday. So to the end of this week in California time, a Quest 3S certified refurbished with a 2-year warranty for $216, not $260, $216. So $1 more than $215. And that is from Meta's official US eBay page. So yes, Meta has its own, retailer store on eBay. It's official from Meta. You're not buying from a third-party seller. And it's kind of a collaboration between Meta and eBay, because Meta says that, it makes sure that these headsets are inspected and thoroughly cleaned, professionally cleaned, thoroughly tested, and restored to original factory settings so that they function and look like new and include the same accessories and cables as new devices, while eBay says that this is eligible for their 2-year certified refurbished warranty. So the funny thing is here, and the crazy part, is that that's actually longer. That's double the warranty you would normally get from buying a new Quest 3S from Meta. So I understand that there are some people who have a visceral reaction to buying certified refurbished products. It's something I used to do a lot to save money years ago. I really found it a great way to get some of the latest technology while saving money. And I had a great experience with certified refurbished, meaning refurbished by the manufacturer and sold. I haven't personally had a Quest headset certified refurbished, so I can't personally vouch for it, but I have seen multiple reviews from people saying it felt to them indistinguishable from getting a new headset. And yet $216 for a fully standalone headset with included track controllers, hand tracking, and color mixed reality, as we just mentioned, that can play games like regular VR games as well as these room aware and body aware mixed reality experiences like Laserdance. That's a crazy deal. We've never seen a price that low for that capability set. But I actually think the proper Quest 3 with 512 gigabyte model, the only one that exists, its certified refurbished deal is even better. So obviously, if you are trying to just, spend as little money as possible, the Quest 3S is there for you. But the proper Quest 3, we always still continue to recommend because its pancake lenses are clearer and sharper over a wider area. They are wider field of view. They're precisely adjustable. It's symmetric adjustment, but it's still precise. They have this really wide eye box, so even if you do set your IPD wrong, it doesn't really matter. And you also get like a slimmer design that feels less heavy. So what's the deal there? Well, it's $360 for a certified refurbished full Quest 3. So that's $140 off buying it brand new, which is a crazy, crazy good deal. And putting it another way, you can, until the end of this week, with this deal, get a Quest 3 with half a terabyte of storage for only $60 more than the regular price of Quest 3S. That's the kind of way to put it here. So I think these are really, really good deals. If you are someone who's very price sensitive and you haven't jumped in yet, why wouldn't you? And also, if you're thinking about, what do I get my, nephew or niece or whatever for Christmas or whatever holiday you celebrate, well, this could be a perfect thing to grab at this moment.
So you see Nick Tater out there became a member and then asked us a question about whether we were following Wired's reporting of what billionaires do. We do pay attention to what billionaires do with their money. We would invite a billionaire onto the show to have a conversation with us about how they spend their money and their choices. We haven't had a billionaire on this show yet, I don't think, but we would invite them on at some point. I just wanted to reply to that comment or that the sort of subject there, and then get back to this sort of refurbished thing. Do you think I could sell a pair of touch controllers for $16?
Could you sell them as in they're used?
Yeah. Like I'm going and buying the Quest 3S at 200. I want to go out. I want it to be $200 in price. I don't want the controllers. I want to go play Laser Dance for $200 with the Quest 3S. That's and I need logically in my heart to it have cost me $199 to do that, not have needed these controllers to do that.
You probably could. The market for them would be people who have broken their controller. They've smashed it into a wall and they need to buy a new one, or they've lost it. I never really understand how people lose things of this size, but they do all the time, every day. So there are people selling just one or two controllers on eBay. You would probably sell them one each, and you probably get more than $16. You'd probably get about 20 each, given that they're sold replacements. You can do what you're wanting.
It's funny. I needed to have. You're always talking about the cost of these things. I'm ready. Yeah, that this is great. I'm going to make a profit here. I'm going to get a Quest 3S, and I'm going to write Laser Dance on the front of it, and it's going to be the only game installed on it. And I'm going to get my $20 back from the controllers, which I don't need anymore. And anyone that comes visits, that's the machine to go check out Laser Dance. I'll put it in demo mode if I can, so it's just locked into that game. Can I do that?
I don't think you can, but my one pushback is that I think you'd be doing VR and mixed reality a disservice by putting them in the 3S rather than the 3. And
no, the 3 is for me. I don't share the 3 with other people. Okay,
really?
That's.
I want to give
kidding.
them. I was hoping you were kidding. I want to give them the people who I demo to the best possible experience. And I'll say this again because we said it at the start. The lenses in the proper Quest 3 are not just slightly better than the 3S. They are significantly better. And if you can afford it, you should always get the proper Quest 3. It is worth the difference. Just one fundamental question here. Andrew Tech has asked, what site I'm seeing much higher prices on Meta's site? So this is specifically on Meta's official eBay store. If you go to uploadvr.com, we have a link in our article. You also need to apply a discount code, which we have in the article. You'll find it easily there on uploadvr.com. Just look for the article with the picture of the Quest 3S box. It's all linked there, ready for you to pick it up.
Yeah, it's should we mention that it's a tough time to sort of buy a Quest? I mean, like you said this already, but aren't we due faster devices next year in general? Like, is that something we need to mention?
Sure. I do think, the Quest 2 had a 3-year life cycle. It was on the market for 4 years, but it was replaced by the Quest 3 in 3 years. And next year, it will be 3 years from when Quest 3 launched. So what I'm trying to say here is, if Qualcomm and Meta stick to their same cycle, which is you get a new XR2 Gen 2 generation, a new XR2 generation every 3 years. We would expect one next year. So we would expect an XR2 Gen 3 to arrive in late 2026. So you could be in a situation here where in a year from now, there is a headset on the market from somebody that uses the Gen 3. However, that said, our understanding based on our sources is that Meta is actually not going to release a traditional Quest 4 next year, and instead is prioritizing shipping a headset at around $1,000 that will be optimized for virtual screens, watching movies, immersive video with a tethered compute puck, not the traditional Quest form factor, and again, at $1,000. So if $1,000 doesn't sound like something you want to go for, look, to be clear, these things obviously change. It's possible, they price it at 800, 900, 1,000, 1,200, but it's going to be around that. We understand quite solidly from our sources that it's going to be in that area of pricing. The Wall Street Journal has also reported this, by the way. If you don't want to trust us, there's two people with sources on this now. Our understanding is that that's the price range you're talking about. So I don't see Meta specifically coming out with something next year that is, at this kind of price. We're talking about $216 and $360 here. If that's your price range, you don't care about $1,000 headsets. But that doesn't, of course, it's something to keep in mind.
Nick, I am enjoying your commentary here. They said what was David suggesting we might see this Gen 3? I got distracted, and he's in our comments distracting me. I actually wish I had a separate 3 or 3S in pristine, lightly used condition. I just got my wife to put on my 3 the other day to watch a clip, and her main takeaway was that my Quest 3 smells. That was the use case I was suggesting, is why that thing just needs to sit there for a guest. And it's like, you just tell them how to adjust the lens distance, and it's ready to play. Go press the button on that wall. Like in a dream of how to demonstrate VR to someone, that should be the first demo. Like you've got Encounter Dinosaurs on Apple Vision Pro, which is, I've put a couple of people in that. I've had people nope out of the headset because they're too afraid of the dinosaur, and with good reason, right? Like it's terrifying. There's other experiences you could actually put more people into that won't scare them so bad that they leave the headset, and laser dance is one of them, right? Again, my point is, no controllers. You could leave it in demo mode. It's clean, doesn't need to be cleaned before it's used. You show them how to adjust the lenses. That's a dream for a lot of people.
Yeah, for sure. For me, I always want to make sure they're in those pancake lenses. Just before we move on from this, I just want to clarify, because I see a lot of people asking, what is the situation on a Gen 3 XR2 chip, and when might it happen, and what do we expect? To be clear, we expect, and expect is the key word, that late next year, Qualcomm will have an XR2 Gen 3, a true next generation chip for these kind of headsets. However, we do not, for the first time ever, expect Meta to then introduce a new sub $500 headset that uses this chip. Instead, next year, we expect Meta to focus on its roughly $1,000 seated focused headset that is a external compute puck, different form factor than traditional Quests. However, as Onakazi rightly points out, that doesn't mean that we might not see a third-party Horizon OS headset do this. For example, it's very possible that the Asus headset is set to essentially be the Quest 4 that Meta isn't doing. It's still, then, I wouldn't expect it at the kind of prices we're talking about today of $216 and $360. So to just put this all into the kind of summary, I do not expect Meta, at least, and I can't think of anyone, to come out with a headset at the kind of prices we're talking today anytime soon that makes these obsolete. So if this is your price range, I don't think you have to worry about any company swooping in and shipping a $300 headset that obsoletes these things anytime soon at this price point.
Yeah, lots of things to think about there, depending what your use case is. You're approaching a headset, what kind of person you are. Are you a developer? Are you just looking for some gaming? Do you want to do a lot of flat screen? Those are all things. Do you want to do a lot of VR? Do you want to do a lot of PC streaming VR? Those are all an assortment of questions. And I see our commenters asking about all other device makers that we expect here. So for a good 6 months there, Andrew Bosworth, the CTO at Meta, had kind of a good laugh at Google, saying they just need to ship their headset. Well, that just happened. So Samsung just shipped their headset, the very first Android XR headset, and that changes the market here. And so what David is kind of outlining here is next year, what looks like is happening is Meta's saying we're actually going to go high market with our next chipset and our devices a little bit, and we're going to maybe make a space underneath there for someone to replace the $300 and $500 devices. That isn't us. We don't have to do that. But again,
but not at 300 and 500.
Okay, well, what? So there's a big space there, right? Below 1,000.
Yes, I think that's to just kind of summarize. I think you're making great points there. But what I'm saying is, between Meta and their partners, we're talking about the 700 to 1,200 range. I think that's what's next for Meta. I don't think anything is coming at this price point anytime soon. I'd love to.
So fascinating. It's just, it feels like there's still a space on Horizon OS to do something with a newer chipset in a lower price. But
that's what they were going to. And that was the plan for Quest 4. There was going to be a Quest 4 and 4S, Pismo Low and Pismo High. And they pushed that out to at least 2027. That was the big news this year in Meta's headset strategy, right? That was the plan. But instead they're saying, we want to prioritize getting this $1,000 seated headset out. And the idea is, as you say, it is to come under Samsung and under Apple and say, well, we're going to deliver a similar experience for, roughly half the price as Samsung and a third of the price of Apple. That's the kind of pitch from Meta's perspective.
So I think there's a lot to think about here. On Apple Vision Pro, we have photorealistic human avatars. We have avatars that look night and day different from these when we go inside of our Apple Vision Pros. But there's none of the games that you get on the Quest ecosystem. So you have people in these headsets for completely different reasons, doing completely different things. And the price is enormous between these things. What happens when we start seeing those photorealistic avatars coming down to much lower priced hardware? And what happens when we see, there's so many options here. What the reason I was bringing up the analogy of Andrew Boss was sort of teasing Google about the delivery of its first headset. Now we're in the space where anyone could release a low-cost Android XR headset that has any number of features that they want. And it's actually, now we get to push Andrew Bosworth back and say, where are the other manufacturers shipping Horizon OS headsets? Now It's their turn to deliver on that.
So yeah, that is an interesting idea that you brought up there, the idea that somebody could come and make a low-cost Android XR headset. And I see some of the commentators here suggesting, like, what if a Chinese company comes in, Xiaomi or someone? It's possible, but the issue there is that they still have to make, in most cases, a hardware margin. In smartphones, it gets a little bit more complicated because the sheer scale of smartphones, as well as the fact that they can bundle a lot of services and ads into the OS, means that you do get companies like Xiaomi doing incredible things. The issue fundamentally is that the content revenue is going to Google. They're getting the 30% cut of the Play Store. So the reason that Meta can sell these headsets at the kind of prices we're talking about today is that Meta makes the content money as well, right? It's vertically integrated. It's also the same reason that the Steam Deck, according to Gabe Newell, he has heavily hinted that the Steam Deck, the handheld console, is heavily subsidized, is at least cost or perhaps even subsidized. He's talked about it being painfully priced for Valve, which you can understand what that means. Valve makes the money off Steam, right? So in the same sense here, that's why Meta can do this. In theory, Google could. There's nothing that's stopping Google from coming out and making this. But I don't think right now the last thing it would want to do to its partners would be to come in with this low-cost thing. And that may also be why Meta doesn't want to do this again so soon. It's a real struggle here, right? If you come out with the $300 to $500 headset that's using the subsidization that is powered by the fact that you run the store, that's unfair to the competitors. We bring this up so often on this, to the other manufacturers. We bring this up so often on this show. You have to make money from the product somehow. You either make a hardware margin or you run the store. That's the dice here. That's the game. So these headsets can be this price because Meta runs the store. Asus won't run the store. Samsung doesn't run the store for Google Play either, right? It's $1,800. But more broadly, Galaxy XR proved that there's a lot of space between 500 and 3,500, but I think there's still a lot of space between 500 and 1,800.
Yeah, great commentary there. And then on the user side of things, we just want to do interesting things with Android packages, APKs, and there's a very wide world of distribution out there beyond the stores that is available in certain systems in certain ways, and everyone is like going to be discovering what that means. Like, it meant something. Am I wrong? Am I wrong that in VR Chat's earliest days, you could go install VR Chat straight from like a browser window, or you could install it like to your PC, or you could install it from Steam? Was there always an installer outside of Steam, or was it
Oh yeah,
always
it was before. It was not on Steam at launch. It was just something you got from, I think maybe it was an Oculus Share, or maybe just on their own URL. But I have very distinct memories of just downloading VR Chat from their website, and I remember the Steam launch as a thing that happened as well.
So I think that's just it's an important thing to be able to, like, there's both places you can go get something, and we forget we forget about that when an app gets when a store gets dominant. But like, I've done magical things with APKs installed straight to a Quest just by logging into my account systems. But it's like Meta hasn't had a good reason to support that, because they've been blocked by Google in certain aspects. So we're facing an ongoing battle. They're going to have to figure out how to make this a good experience for users, right? Like, as it is right now, you're going to find some really cool things to do on your headset with SideQuest, and it's part of the same journey.
Yeah, let's talk about Sharp's weird headset. It's a weird one. So Sharp is crowdfunding a lightweight tethered PC VR headset. You can see the design here. Sharp says that the body of the headset is under 200 grams. So that means it's lighter than any shipping headset except for the big screen Beyond 2 and the Shift-All Megane X. So it's going to be one of the lightest headsets, assuming it shipped today, right? There may be headsets between now and then that ship, such as, I think Shift-All has their Mark II coming. Pimax has their Dream Air as well. But that's the main pitch here. The issue is that the specs are strange. So it has 2K LCD displays, no eye tracking. It has only 2 tracking cameras, right? These 2 tracking cameras here, which is something we haven't seen since like the original Windows MR headsets and a major headset. Most headsets after Quest copied the Oculus Quest's approach of having one camera on each side of the front, each corner of the front, to be clear. And so that means you're going to get quite a limited controller tracking range. These controllers look to be very similar to Quest 2 controllers, but like with a much chunkier kind of design on the tracking rings here. And then it has one color pass-through camera. Like, that's a really odd one. So you get kind of just mono pass-through. I guess that's not the weirdest thing about the headset. It just makes me wonder, like, who is this for? You know, it's not going to appeal to VR chat users because, you know, a lack of eye tracking and hand tracking means that you're not going to get those advanced social features. And it's not a Lighthouse headset, it's inside-out tracking. So, you know, you don't have the ability to add the trackers on that certain VR chat users care about. I mean, it's a really odd one. The resolution isn't high enough for it to be a really compelling sim racing headset, right? It's the same resolution as Quest 3, roughly, 2K LCD. Yeah, it's a really odd one. I'm not really sure who this is for. Also, they're crowdfunding it, so this is a massive electronic company, Sharp. So why are you crowdfunding it? Why not launch it? Maybe they're trying to see if there's any demand. Sharp also did say, like, earlier this year that they were building this weird controller. On some level, I like that they're doing wacky and weird stuff, but on the other level, look, this would have been a really cool headset 3 years ago in a market before, big screen beyond, before
The
like,
controller again?
yeah, I mean, we covered this like 6 months ago when it was announced, but this is a weird and wacky controller that is kind of like a weird hybrid of gloves and buttons and thumbsticks. They haven't really said if they're definitely going to make this. It was only something they said they're considering making. Yeah.
Yeah.
But the one that they are kind of crowdfunding here on this platform, the crowdfunding platform should go up this month, is this. And if you're in the audience right now and this does appeal to you in any way, let me know. I can't think of why it would be. I guess what you could say is of the other currently ultralight headsets, they're all Lighthouse based. They require SteamVR base stations. This is inside out. But I can't imagine buying an inside out headset with only two cameras. And it's not like it has something super compelling like 4K OLED or 2.5K. I guess the one thing I should say is that we don't know the price. They haven't said the price. If this was really cheap, then sure, I understand the whole thing now. Something in me says that it's not going to be really cheap is the problem. I feel like it's not. But look, if they were like putting this thing out at, I don't know, $400 or something like that, maybe you see a market there of saying, I want to I just want to do PC VR tethered, because this is a tethered PCR headset, to be clear, and I just want it to be lightweight. I don't really care about controller tracking. You could see like a somewhat niche there, but this isn't. I could be wrong, but it's probably going to be double my guess.
You know what headset I'm reminded of is the old Intel dev kit product that they showed. I made a joke about this on my social, but it was Intel merged reality was their term that they had back in 2016 for their pitch to do pass-through VR and all the things you really needed, cutting out your hands. And it had a very blocky, large design on it, as I recall, and then it disappeared into obscurity as other companies shipped what they imagined. Yeah, weird one. And I'm ready to hear about your next story here. Is there anything in the comments you want to talk about first?
Sure. I just see someone saying that like they were interested in the gloves if they had force feedback. That was the weird part about these gloves. They're not. It's just, to be clear, they did talk about having this really cool kind of vibro tactile feedback. So it's going to feel like you're touching textures, but you're not getting a resistance. I don't expect them to ever actually make this. The headset itself, I would be skeptical if it even launches. We'll have to see what the crowdfunding situation is like here. And I've seen people point out that the glasses arms design here probably isn't going to be sufficient at 200 grams for glasses arms to start to make sense. You have to be closer to 100 grams. It's tough to go much over 100 grams and still be able to keep everything on glasses arms like this. I can see this being uncomfortable. I don't know what's going on inside Sharp here. Again, 3-4 years ago, great. In 2025, coming into 2026, no.
Smart saying, I'd love to see us do a show in Apple Vision Pros with personas. Yes, we tried that once shortly after they released, and it was a technical disaster. It's a very hard technical problem to have 3 headsets that kind of show the views spatially. We could do it flat, but you lose a lot of the, like when a third person is just showing the avatars moving around spatially, it's actually a pretty powerful thing, and we haven't decided on the right execution path there.
Exactly. As Ian is saying here, spatial personas are exclusive to Apple Vision Pro. So like right now, what is this that we're in? It's Android OpenXR app that's running on 2 Quest headsets, plus a Windows PC app that is what you're seeing, the viewer, right? So there is no equivalent here. We can't run a Mac app that can see the spatial personas in a 6DoF 3D environment. We can, of course, just show you the Persona 2D output on a webcam grid. But what advantage does that have over just a regular webcam grid? We don't get the sense of space. You can't do different camera angles. There's no like us pointing to this specific thing. And, all of that's kind of lost there. So look, ideally, we do get this solved by just having a human being act as the camera and sort of, there's a third Vision Pro in this call. They are staying completely silent with their mic muted, I guess, and just turning their head between us, trying really hard to not, shake their head. If they have to like get a drink or something, they have to like be really, really careful about how that kind of, moves the headset. If I don't know if they're a spouse comes into the room or their pet, they're going to have to like ignore them or something. And, having a human being act as a head worn camera for 3 hours is a tough ask. Theoretically, you could try to trick the headset into thinking it's on and just kind of keep it still. That would be pretty cool. I would think we could live with that even still. Look.
We switch the views, right? Like we do some of the show in the gridded view and then some of the view the proper way with the person as a camera. But then, like what we're trying to convey to you is the quality difference between these two avatar systems, right? Like that would be the purpose of going into personas, right? If we're not doing it live, we lose the live interaction that defines this show, right?
Yeah.
And so we do pre-record it. Well, then we don't get this live cool thing that we do here. If we do it live in headset, then we're potentially dealing with technical issues and everything else you said. A person
needing a
having
third Vision Pro.
Yeah, and having the person keep their head still for 3 hours and like looking in the right direction when I hand you a digital object. And so but that's the point, right? Is in that space, I could go grab a window, go, "Hey, David, I wanted to show you something." And he's now looking at this cool thing that I discovered over in my space. And we're like, that's a dream, right?
It's amazing. Yeah.
We'd love to have that, but you're talking about architecting for a completely different thing that is still actively developing.
I see someone saying some developer needs to make an app to facilitate this. They can't. This is what I'm trying to get across. It's not even that spatial personas are exclusive to Vision Pro. They're exclusive to FaceTime. You don't have Apple does not give developers the ability to manually integrate personas. So you can build a Vision Pro windowed or volumetric app that personas can be in, right? But I guess around is the better term. So I can have this volume here, an app that you've built, but the app knows nothing about the persona. It doesn't get like a virtual webcam view, a texture. It doesn't get any of that. All of it's handled at the system level. This kind of comes down to what the shared space is. In the shared space of Vision OS, you're in one Apple app, and everything else is really a sub app in a way. It's hard to find the right terminology for it, but there's no magic solution here. I see someone saying, "Cool, we could each record what we're seeing and combine the recordings." Yeah, you could. That would be really hard to do live, though. That would be a really huge challenge to do live. We could theoretically do it. I don't think that would be an amazing experience. Can you imagine, there's a reason that no interview in the real world ever does that, as in just switches between first-person views. The TV show Peep Show, if you're in the UK, or if you watch British shows, kind of was like that, and that's not... Again, you would miss the kind of shared space. Yes, you would see in first person. It would be kind of cool. Look,
Hot Ones is an interesting show, partially because of this social interaction happening in real time between two people who are watching them each sweat in real time. You can't. We're to demonstrate this on my side, I pulled up the MX Ink, which we'll talk about in 3 stories away. But the demonstration I want to point out here is I'm holding a physical object. I've reached out of virtual reality and tried to bring into virtual reality with us a single object from the physical world to talk about with you, David.
Yeah.
And I simply cannot do it, right? There's no way to show you that thing from my room. And Apple and Meta have completely different ways of approaching how one would do that. Not just an object in the room, but a window that is actually floating in front of you, or a 3D model of an object that you want to hand between people. They're all architected completely different.
Yeah, look, we can wax lyrical about the not millions, but many, many advantages of the Vision Pro approach in spatial personas. They're amazing. What you can do is amazing. We cannot provide a camera for them. I'm just going to go through a few comments here before we move on to our next topic. See, Smart Light Dimwit said, I saw Brian Tong and iJustine chat with 2 Apple execs about Vision Pro M5 and personas passing a virtual headset around. So we got that same briefing. We were not allowed to record it. And what you're seeing is exactly what I just described. There is an Apple employee standing there in the call as a persona that they all have to ignore and pretend they don't see because it's the camera. They are standing there and turning their head like this.
And that camera is hooked up to a non-foveated system, so that it removes the automatic foveation from the headsets that happens every time we're doing our recordings in a headset. We just deal with it because it's okay most of the time in most of your recordings. But if we wanted to do presentation style broadcasting for your audience at 1080p or 4K, it shouldn't be blurry on David's midsection when
That's
you guys are looking at me, right? It's not.
that,
We should have that. So that's a whole other layer of complexity that someone has had to go through to provide that footage for one outlet today.
yeah, that's a great point as Ian makes. Even if we did do the first person footage thing, it would be foveated. You would see everything blurry except what I'm looking at. I promise you, we've looked into this. I assure you, I would love to do it. I see Parmesan asking, so you couldn't create an app with a virtual camera to record a persona FaceTime call. The access is restricted by Apple. Correct. You cannot do it. The system does not provide any API that can do it. You can, as an app, build a experience that lets you do stuff with your own persona, but it's just like the FaceTime view that it gives, virtual webcam view it gives to any other app. If I was in a call using this and Ian came up behind me, you wouldn't see Ian because it's not really an actual view of the 6DoF shared space. It's just a fake webcam texture that's being provided. Look, the ideal solution here is I see AELYT saying, what does Apple need to do for allow for this? Here's the answer. They need to make a spatial FaceTime client for macOS. They need to make it possible for you to join a spatial persona call as a disembodied participant on macOS. To be clear, if you can join a FaceTime on macOS, of course you can, but you'll just see everyone as a webcam grid today. So that's kind of what they need to.
Can I flip this around and talk about Google and Meta real quick?
Because I don't think we have a lot of time to go too far off topic. I'd love to move on, but if you do want to, please.
I think it'll be related. Starline, that product that Google had, is Starline still in use? That still exists? That was the product where you could do a glasses-free spatial call with remote participants, but it was $100,000 plus product. It was a very expensive installation, but you could do this from a Google. Where I'm going with this is it feels like someone at Google needs to call someone at Meta over a Google Meet and a WhatsApp call. And when those two technologies can present their avatars the same as a persona call does, you will have the equivalent on the Android ecosystem. But until there's a system for a person in a Galaxy XR headset to scan themselves in as themselves at the quality of a persona, and then to call another headset from another manufacturer on the same system, you're not going to have an equivalent to what we're discussing. So David just gave you what is needed on the Mac ecosystem to better do this. I'm trying to say, there's an obvious place for Google and Meta to find a way to fit together like puzzle pieces in the Android ecosystem to do the exact same thing that you are asking for Apple to do.
It will be fascinating to see what Google's likeness implementation is, likeness being Google's equivalent to spatial personas, as well as what Meta's codec avatars is. Will it be locked down and only at the system level, or will I be able to literally just update the studio and add Google likenesses and personas? We don't know. We don't know. The trade-off here is privacy. Apple's approach means that no developer ever gets the actual, it's not really a 3D model, it's a Gaussian splat, but they never get the actual visual 3D data of your persona, right? They cannot. In theory, if Apple was to make this an SDK that any app could just use and integrate however they want and even could reskin your persona and all this kind of stuff, in theory, an app developer could use this data and then have a replicated photorealistic 3D moving version of you. That would be a massive privacy issue. So I understand why Apple has not given it to developers. That's why I'm saying so it's also a huge issue with interoperability, because if this dream you want, Ian, that all these spatial personas can talk to other headsets, that means that the other headset has to render them. So Apple would have to trust a Meta headset to be rendering your photorealistic person, which I don't see it ever happening. In fact,
man, you got to straight to Apple IDs versus Meta IDs, right? What passport do you come with? What RD card? Is it
more than
Retina?
No,
verified?
it's not. It's not. It's not the account. It's in the secure enclave. It's stored in the same. It's equivalent to like your thumbprint or your Face ID on your phone. No one. It never gets transferred off the phone. Your spatial persona never gets transferred off the headset, except through Apple's own secure system of FaceTime, where it's doing end-to-end encryption and all this kind of stuff. So in theory, I wonder if you could like man in the middle it and steal it. In practice, I don't think anyone's tried.
It's more like I'm just saying that we've got two ID systems and they don't talk to one another, right? Like we're both saying the same thing, but how do you literally? I came with my Apple ID and you've got your Google ID, and both of us are like, these don't exchange. They don't allow us to render one another in reality, which is just stupid.
I guess in theory, how this could work is, in theory, say you have a Quest 4 that has face and eye tracking. We can't even do it without face and eye tracking realistically. Hypothetically, you have a Quest 4 in the future that has face and eye tracking. You could theoretically have an Apple FaceTime app on the Meta Horizon store that you download, and then it's only supported in Apple's. So you do get interoperability between headsets, but not platforms. That I could absolutely see that happening. More likely between Apple and Google and Meta. As I keep saying, I've seen the leaked emails. Anyone can go read them online. Apple detests Meta and would shoot itself in the foot if it meant shooting Meta in the toe. But I could see that at least happening. You could see, for example, Google Meet arriving on Quest and Vision Pro with a likeness 3D support or something like that. But the idea that could you ever actually just put a spatial persona in this studio like this and let me as a developer access it? I can't see Apple ever doing that.
Fascinating stuff. Let's move on to this Cambridge and Meta researchers story with the retinal resolution being far above 60 ppd is what the research is pointing to, that we actually can discern, or some people can discern, far above that detail. Let's break this down, and then we've got two more stories after that.
Sure. So often on the spec sheet of a headset, you will just see the panel resolution, right? 2K by 2K, 4K by 4K, whatever. And for similar field of view headsets, that's a decent way to compare. But as soon as you start really changing the field of view, or even the amount of lens distortion and how much you prioritize the center and the periphery, it becomes useless. So the real stat that matters is the pixels per degree. How many pixels of this display occupy each degree of your field of view. For an example, to really just get this in your head, a really extreme example, if you had two headsets that used the exact same panels, but one headset had twice the field of view, that headset would also have half the angular resolution, and it would look to have half the resolution, even though it's using the same physical panel with the same resolution. So that's a quick explainer for anyone who's not familiar with the idea of angular resolution. It is the real way you should measure VR headsets. In practice, it's hard because, again, it's quite hard to calculate. Not every manufacturer gives it. You can do an average PPD by just dividing the horizontal resolution by the horizontal field of view and so on. But that's not actually how things work because the distortion of each lens is variable. So that's the background. So where are we on PPD? So the original Oculus DK2 had around DK1, over a decade ago, had around 6 pixels per degree, which is legally blind. You would be considered legally blind if you had the vision that even a perfect vision person gets inside an Oculus DK1. Flash forward 10 years, affordable headsets like Quest 3 are around 25 ppd. High-end headsets like Apple Vision Pro and Galaxy XR reach just over 35 ppd, between around 35 and 40. Vario XR4, the thousands and thousands of dollars PC headset for governments, achieves about 51 pixels per degree in the center. So the question is, how far can we go from here? Where is the point of diminishing return? And what is the limit? What does the human eye see? What is the limit past which you would not see any more detail, even by increasing the PPD? The generally accepted value in XR has been 60 pixels per degree is what we call retinal. And there are various reasons for that because it equates to roughly 20/20 vision. But there has been skepticism about this figure of 60 being the real limit for years and years now. For example, earlier this year, I tried Meta's Tiramisu prototype, which was beyond retinal with 90 pixels per degree. And I wasn't able to dynamically tune the resolution during the demo. It was just fixed to 90 pixels per degree. But I did speak to the researchers behind the headset, and they told me that in their lab, they did have exactly that, a literal little knob that they could use to change the angular resolution dynamically. And they had also obviously built other prototypes. They have the butterscotch prototype I tried years ago, which has 56 pixels per degree. And what they told me unequivocally is that they could absolutely see the difference between 60 and 90. So for me and for a lot of people in the world, that was the first public clear clue that, hang on a minute, if 60 is retinal, and this is what we're all talking about in the industry is the limit, why can you see a difference between 60 and 90? And so that's fascinating. And I remember at the time, these researchers said, we really hope someone uses this headset or another technique to do some research here and do some perceptual science. And so researchers from Cambridge University and Meta have now kind of done this research, not with a headset, with a setup that you can see on screen here, where you have the participant's head fixed to a chin rest and a 4K monitor on a motorized reel so that you can adjust the distance. They showed various patterns as well as text. And you can read about the methodology of the study on UploadVR.com, and you can read the study itself. If you're really interested in that sort of stuff, you should. It's a fascinating look into how they do this. But what are the results? What were the results of this study is what we are really concerned about. And firstly, it's that the resolution for which the human eye can discern monochrome detail, so black and white detail, is higher than it can for color detail. So for just these grayscale patterns that were shown throughout the study, to be clear, all the participants were shown all of these various patterns at all these distances. They varied things like the resolution render, the distance, the monitor was shown. They even kind of put the monitor slightly off axis as well, rotationally. There was a lot of data collection done here. Their conclusion is that for grayscale details, of the 18 participants in the study, the average was around 94 pixels per degree. So just a touch higher than tiramisu. For red-green details, it was 89 pixels per degree, so very, very close for red-green. But for yellow-violet patterns, it was all the way down to 53 pixels per degree. So that was the average. There was one participant in the study, the person with the greatest eyesight, according to the results, that could discern 120 pixels per degree for grayscale detail, which suggests that for some people, the threshold for retinal is double the generally accepted figure, which I think we can say at this point now, after tiramisu and this research, should no longer be the generally accepted figure. Now, there's one major caveat here in that because this is a stationary display system, you're not getting the kind of spatial temporal super sampling that you get from a VR headset when your head is doing micro movements. I should say a positionally tracked VR headset, but that the degree to which that is a thing is debated. We need to see more research done on that. And also, if you were like lying down in a bed with your head perfectly still or mostly still, you're not really getting that advantage anyway. So that's a worst case scenario where you just need brute pixels per degree. So the conclusion here, why this matters, what this means is that there is a long, long, long way to go for headsets to get to the actual limits of human vision. There's a long runway here. There is a difference in certain colors, though, that could inform display designs in the very, very long term. But we're a very, very long way away from any of this being a problem for real products anyway.
So, wonderful question here. And David, I'm gonna throw something back. I'm going to read through the comment here from LL. I feel legally blind when viewing a VR concert in Quest 3 when the performers are far away. I'm curious, in Apple Vision Pro, has it reached that threshold where it looks okay or still a pixelated mess? It's a fantastic question. What you're talking about, though, is the pixels in a capture pipeline feeding into a display. And what you have to understand is Apple has the way I'm going to describe is, what was the PPD number of the AVP? Was it 35-ish that you were saying?
Roughly, it's debated, but it's somewhere between 35 and 40-ish.
Okay, so let's say that's the number. What Apple has done with its capture system, the Apple immersive video format, and the cameras that are capturing at a minimum resolution, is try to keep the pixel, like what you're seeing from the capture, as close to 35, the actual display PPD, as they can possibly imagine. Am I explaining that right, David?
Yeah, you're right to say that LL, what you're seeing is far more likely the bottleneck of the capture, the video itself, than the headset. Um, Very rarely would you ever even see a Quest app really be display limited, which is funny. We talk about the idea of putting like higher resolution displays. It would mostly be if you're in something like virtual desktop and you're viewing a literal virtual desktop, and the headset is doing very high resolution rendering, super sampling certain lower fidelity games where you see the developers really crank up the render resolution. So it's absolutely true here to say that you can't just talk about the headset. It has to be the content as well that matters. But the research here was specifically about, like, if you did have infinite compute and you did have the ability to make whatever headset, where would it matter? And look, to be clear, I want to just reinforce how far away we are off this sort of thing. Again, even the thousands of dollar headsets today are at around the 35 ppd range. This prototype that I tried, Tiramisu, it's cheat, I guess, for lack of a better word, to get this resolution, is that it has a field of view of 33 degrees. It's not supposed to be a practical design. And in fact, for Tiramisu 2, their plan is to target 60 ppd instead of 90, but over a 90-degree field of view. So they're actually saying, even though we've seen how amazing this is, it's not practical. Nobody knows how to make a headset with a serious field of view that even gets to these kind of resolutions yet. It was the same thing with Butterscotch that was 54 ppd. It was, I think the field of view was 50 degrees. Look, we are so far away off from this. The other thing is, just because this is a limit, it doesn't mean that it's like very, very important to get there anytime soon. There are diminishing returns. When I tried Butterscotch at around 55 again, it looked incredible. It looked amazing. If you're going to get to that point, if we do get to that point where we have 50 ppd headsets that you can go and buy for an affordable price, I think we're gonna want to push all of the other specs. You're gonna want to get wider field of view. You're gonna want to get higher brightness and high dynamic range and contrast. There are very few scenarios where I think anyone would get a 50 pixel per degree headset even and say, I want more resolution. And I think Andrew Bosworth talked about this too. Like, he was asked, from your experience in these prototypes, where's the point where you would be like, this is good enough that the resolution is no longer a concern at all? And he was like, yeah, around 50 pixels per degree.
That's so difficult to say, right? We're using a term that is derived from talking about what, the iPhone 4? Am I remembering that it was the iPhone 3GS to the iPhone 4, where Apple came out and said, we're now talking about the term retinal resolution. Now, we've crossed the threshold with the amount of pixels that we're packing into the iPhone 4, such that you can no longer discern with the naked eye at a normal viewing distance what you're seeing. We're now applying that to eyes and what we see potentially 24 hours a day. Like, not 24 hours a day, you're going to sleep, but like every moment you're awake, you could potentially be looking through glasses that are augmenting your vision. And that's like, there's a line in Ready Player One that says that it was better than vision, right? It was better than what you can see with the naked eye.
Yeah, I mean, look, when it comes to something like pass-through, it's another scenario where you're going to be camera limited. We're talking about where are you limited in the bottleneck. You're going to be limited on cameras long before you're limited on displays. So like on Quest 3, for example, the display gives you 25 pixels per degree in the center at peak, but the pass-through cameras only give you 18 pixels per degree. And this is something I pointed out when we reviewed Quest 3 2 years ago now. Like the pass-through is distinctly lower resolution than the headset. I can't see that's going to be the case for a very, very long time.
Huffy saying, not to worry, our eyes will be effed before we get to retinal displays. There is actually, I mean, that's part of the research. As you age, your eyes see differently. The focal distances, the speed at which they focus change. We do need, the people that work at Meta and Apple on these problems are some of the most highly paid optical experts in the world to try to solve these issues for us over the long term. But I do appreciate the concept of just aging and our vision changing over the course of being in this market and being affected by the headsets we're wearing too.
The last thing I want to say before we move on here is that it's not just the display, it's actually the lenses as well. Like if you did magically tomorrow, if someone started mass producing a 10K LCD or whatever, like you wouldn't be able to resolve all the pixels. The lenses we have today aren't actually good enough. That was actually one of the huge points of tiramisu. I'm saying that it achieved its 90 ppd by just reducing the field of view, but that's not actually fair. That was one of the things it did. But the other thing is to actually resolve that, they had to come up with this novel optics design. It's not a traditional lens. It's not a pancake lens. It's part of the reason why it's comically enormously thick. It's not a product. It's not a prototype for a product. It's a research prototype. But it was this multi-layer glass lens solution that they had to come up with. And with Tiramisu 2, they're trying to figure out how do you resolve 60 ppd. So I see some people talking about like Pimax headsets saying that, they can get to like 50 ppd or 57 even in theory. Yeah, they highly distort the image so that you're getting much higher resolution in the center than at the periphery, and they use a 4K LCD or something like that, or a 4K micro OLED. In practice, I'm skeptical. I would assume that Pimax's lenses are not actually resolving that 57 pixels per degree on the optics level.
Yeah, so LL saying, such as someone out there, the big unlocks for TVs are now brightness and color vibrancy. Those will make TVs eventually feel like looking through a window. Oh, I mean, so one of the things that VR headsets can do is control the amount of photons hitting you. Like you put on this thing that closes out the light, and now you have full control over how much light gets to the eyes. So like you have to account for 20,000 nits plus in the real world. Now you're inside of a headset and you can control for the range between 10,000 nits of how many colors you show inside that particular range. Like you have all the problems that happen to a TV in the real world, the light streaming in from outside, the lights changing in the room, those things do not exist in a VR headset. So over time, we could have a real problem here with TV technology progressing because VR technology is starting to outstrip it. When more people start getting the message that the best TV in the home that you can own is a lightweight headset, you're going to have people not buying TVs for those purposes you're describing.
Yeah, I think the other pushback, I agree with what you're saying, but the other pushback I would give to the idea that TVs are going to feel like looking through a window is that windows are not 2D. You could have a 16K TV with 10,000 nits. It doesn't matter. It's not going to look like a window because as soon as your head moves, you're going to see that that's just a flat texture.
Johnny Lee has entered the chat, right? You could put a camera on the thing and track one person in the room. But what happens the moment you have two people in the room? It will look like a window to just the one person.
Yep.
And to the other person, it's going to look like a weirdly skewed thing that's actually pretty distracting. Like you're going to be like, why does the TV look like that?
So that's a great point. That's the fundamental flaw of auto stereoscopic displays. They are fundamentally one person only. And you could say that VR headsets are the same, but you just put multiple on in a room. There's no you can scale. Let me just get on this point. Yeah. No way you can scale an auto stereoscopic view. And I saw earlier Ian mention Google's Starline prototype that is now being productized as Google Beam. And it's true. And it gives you the ability to have a full scale, as in correct one-to-one scale, 3D conversation with one photorealistic avatar in front of you, but only one. It can never scale beyond 1-to-1. And actually, you can see that talking about companies coming up with exotic ways to let creators capture a third-person view, you can see some influencers that were given access to this recorded their own footage from a third-person perspective, as in, their videographer did, and it looks exactly like you just said. It looks ridiculous. You have this weird distorted view because it's designed to only be seen by one person. So Starline is an amazing thing if you want to have one person have a conversation with one person. I think that is going to be an amazing technology that you will need a headset for. But as soon as you need to add a third person to that call, never mind a whole meeting room, The technology fundamentally cannot do it.
So, David, I want you to test something with the M5 Vision Pro when you get a chance, and I need to test this with the M2 Vision Pro again. But it was a very, uh, go to get a mirror, and look into the mirror with all of the pass or all the person sensing on, and turn your head like this, left and right at the mirror, and look at your own eyesight eyes in a mirror through the mirror of the pass-through.
I did this within a day of getting the M2 Vision Pro almost 2 years ago.
What did you think? So try it again with the M5. Did it work when you tried it with the M2?
What do you mean by work?
Yes,
I was able to briefly get it showing, yes.
So, but I mean, it's like, did the stereoscopy did it look 3D correct to you as you turned your head left and right?
No.
Try it again now. Yeah, that's what I'm asking you to check.
Okay. Yeah. Anyway, I think this is a great, interesting discussion we've had here today of the idea of, people love this idea of glasses-free 3D. And fundamentally, as we're explaining, nobody's telling you what we're going to tell you now. It's fundamentally flawed because it can only be viewed by one person. That's why you see a lot of these companies saying, we're going to make a tablet that does this, or like a little monitor that you put down on a screen on a view, but you can't put it to your TV. Your TV will never be able to do, unless someone has invented a technology, unless someone invents a technology that I have never heard of. There is no conceivable way I can see for a TV being viewed by multiple people in the same room to have glasses-free 3D. There's just, how would you do it? You'd have to have some sort of light field display that at that point it's ridiculous. There's no shipping display like that anytime soon, decades away.
It's funny the way David's describing this, right? Like we've thought about this. Like we've thought about this. Like we'll just be sitting there going, is there a way? Is there a way that VR doesn't succeed? Right? Like, and this is one of those thought patterns of just going, no, it loses. Oh, like all TVs lose over the length of time to VR because of what David's describing. And we've tried out other scenarios. We've looked at all the research, and it's like, no, it's VR. So
yeah, I see Smart Light Dimwit saying, what about looking glass displays? They are auto stereoscopic displays. Just to be crystal clear, because I don't think we ever really said what this is. The display, the 3D works because it's tracking your head, right? There is a degree of 3D that you're getting inherently, but the perspective correction is done by tracking your head and your eyes and then matching it. But that only works for one person. Fundamentally, every display that you've seen that is a glasses-free 3D display is using what we just described. You can do a little tiny, very weak, 3D effect. Even on the ones that don't need head tracking, the kind of eye box or head box, I should say, is so narrow that you could only ever have one person there anyway, because two human heads cannot occupy the same space by obvious definition. So the only technology that is conceivable that you can use to have a conversation across distance photorealistically with an avatar that looks like someone else for more than a one-on-one call, so with 3 or more people, is VR and AR. There's no other way to do it than to put the headset on or glasses on your head.
So we should move on to the next subject, because as LL is pointing out in our comments, this person's neck is starting to hurt.
Yes,
after he's been on a headset for
this long. Looks like the stereotypical VR headset that's shown in kind of like a dystopian sci-fi movie that's trying to mock it. I want to be crystal clear for anyone wondering, this is not a shipping product. It is a prototype. It's not designed to be comfortable. No one will ship a headset that looks like that.
Pixel pointing out that TVs have lost to phones already. That's a good point. And that's the story of our time, is whether VR can supplant phones. We don't know. We hear about AR, we hear about that other model, and we will have long debates about terminology, but not right now. Well, let's talk about Meta's $1.5 million competition. I saw people in the Time Travelers catching up in the audience. Great to have you as you tune in. Our audience always builds over time, and I think we're going to have a nice, robust discussion still as we get into our last subject after the competition one.
Yeah, let's quickly cover this. The reason I think it's interesting to note is because throughout this year, Meta has run a total of $3 million of competitions for mobile-focused Horizon Worlds. And that has obviously brought a lot of criticism from traditional VR developers of saying, think of what this could be doing for true VR and mixed reality content. So now Meta is running a content for true VR and mixed reality content for native apps. There are a bunch of different ways you can make them in Unity and Unreal and in all these other tools like Spatial SDK and React Native. But this is not about Horizon Worlds. This is everything except Horizon Worlds, to make it simple. This current competition that we're talking about today, you cannot enter a Horizon World. It's very made clear in the conditions of the competition. This is for an actual app that would go on the store. So what is it? It is for new apps or significant updates that are made or released or entered, I should say, in the next month. There's 1 month between now and the deadline. So it's kind of like a extended hackathon. By significant, Meta means that an update would have to add a new modality. So it would have to add hand tracking to an app that doesn't already have hand tracking, or mixed reality, or multiplayer, or a workshop equivalent where people can do user-generated content. It has to be a new modality. You cannot just, polish the UI in your app and say, I'm entering my app as an update. So that's the basic conditions here. Within it, there are 32 prizes of up to $100,000. There are prizes for the best entertainment experience, $100,000 for the winner, $60,000 for the runner-up, and $30,000 for honorable mention. The same prize tier is available for the best lifestyle experience, which Meta defines as something that enhances your daily life, how you get done, learn new skills, or connect with others around you. There is one for the best social game. So that's defined as a game that's either online multiplayer or co-located multiplayer. And again, the same tier, 100,000 winner, 60,000 runner-up, 30,000 honorable. A casual game, so a game that is accessible, single player, and designed for quick, engaging fun, same prize tier. And then there are 6 winners of the judge's choice, which are $30,000 each. And they are just for things that don't really fit in another category, but push the boundaries of what's possible. After that, those kind of fundamental contexts, you can win the special awards, which are for integrating specific features or using specific SDKs and toolkits. So one of those, there's 3 winners for $50,000 of best implementation of hand interactions, best use of the pass-through camera API, best spatial SDK app, best immersive web SDK app. Then there are, $25,000 for best Android app leveraging features unique to MetaQuest. So that's like a 2D Android app. Another one, best 2D Android utility app. Another one for $25,000, best Android app for travel mode. And finally, best app built with React Native. You can see this list on our website. Point is here, you're seeing prizes between $25,000 and $100,000 for winners, and there are 32 in total. So 32 developers should be getting paid by Meta based on whether they win. So yeah, it's an interesting one. Obviously, these aren't, like enormous amounts that are going to cause people to spin up a giant year-long project, but the whole point is it's literally a month-long hackathon. It is actually in multiple places throughout Meta's website listed as a hackathon, and that's how it should really be thought of.
So any amount of money being thrown at Quest developers is news at this point, which is kind of what a lot of devs reaching out to us kind of implied by letting us know that this was out there, just sort of like, wow, this is actually being thrown away. It's not a lot of money in the grand scheme of things, but it's still more than enough to sort of change a developer's life pretty dramatically if you were able to secure one of these. I do want to talk about the TV people in our audience. I was going to call them TV truthers, but that seems a little bit mean. Games out there and LL talking about HDR. I will be curious. Can you both mention whether you have OLED TVs? I'm very, very curious. The people that are talking about the value of HDR out there, I want to know if you are enjoying your HDR on an OLED TV. Games saying, at the moment, we are at just above 100 nits to the eyes for the Apple Vision Pro, 800 nits in 5-year-old TVs, and 2,000 in newer sets.
Do you know what you get in a cinema with 3D glasses? 50 nits, half of that.
Yeah, all right, there you go, right? And you're talking about 3D, right? You're talking about 3D having what you're getting. And then you're talking about HDR, right? I have, what go look at the number of TVs being sold today and break down the number based on how many of them are OLED, right? The vast majority are taking the worst backlighting off of the shelf, off of a manufacturer, and then they're taking the cheapest display they can possibly imagine, and they're attaching those two things together in the thinnest frame imaginable. And then you're looking at it and going, do I want 55 or do I want 75? And your price difference there is $500 or $800, right? You're not talking about the super high end cinema people who are going, I want a 2K OLED television that is 70 inches wide because I am viewing it at the correct viewing distance. And I'm going to control the light in my living room such that nothing distracts and I can get the matte framing on this thing. Like, you erase a lot of these discussions very quickly by just putting a very, very good OLED display inside of a headset. And then you no longer have you no longer have to dedicate a whole room in your house to the cinematic experience that you crave and maybe no one else in the rest of your house gives a crap about.
Yeah, look, I still think there's a massive place for TVs and will be for a long time for a family getting together in the living room and watching something together. I think it is a lot more convenient to do that than to put on two headsets in the same room. But the idea here is that the amount of time that people are watching movie and TV content not on the giant OLED screen in their living room is more significant than you may think, right? So if someone is using that, often, one of the teenagers will be up in their room watching Netflix on their laptop or the hand-me-down or bargain bucket Walmart TV that they got put in their room. And it's that kind of headsets replace. And also, on a plane, how often do I go to don my Vision Pro and get in a 4K HDR cinema and see the person beside me watching something on their phone? Literally, sometimes I've been on flights where people are literally just holding their phone up like this. I don't know how their arm survives, but I've literally seen people do this and just sit there like this for the whole flight. Horrible experience. Or those little LCDs in the back of the plane. It's not just the quality for me. It's the portability. It's the fact that you can do it anywhere in your home. You can do it in bed while your partner sleeps because there's no light glow. It stays all within the headset. And then once you finished your TV show or movie, you can just put the headset off and join them to sleep. The portability is significant, and the 3D. That's the other thing. And as we keep saying over and over again, I see someone posting a paper about a 3D display system. I don't know if you're trying to say that there's something novel about it, but the description you've pasted clearly describes that it uses the user's gaze, which means everything we've just been saying applies. It only works for one person anyway. So if you are already limited to 3D that only works for one person, at that point you might as well put the headset on and have a 140-inch 3D display rather than be limited to what you're stuck with. And as Ian points out, obviously the other issues, of course, that you have a window with light that comes in and scatters over the TV. All these OLED TVs absolutely suck if there's any light coming into the room. In dark scenes, you're not getting any of the detail. You're just getting it washed out. There are a million reasons the headset is for that.
Now, in defense of the TV truthers talking about HDR out there, David and I have both looked inside of 20,000 nit providing HMDs at SIGGRAPH. And when you look, David has a model of a studio light here in his studio. Does that thing cast any light, or is that just a white circle you've got on that thing over there?
That does cast light a little tiny bit. Yeah, I didn't want it to be overwhelming, but it does. It's just that these headsets aren't very bright.
Well, so David's just describing what is happening here. There's a studio light that I saw inside that 20,000 nit research headset, and when I looked at it, it's like it's wild. It breaks your brain because you've never looked at it in a headset before. You've never felt reality look as bright as a studio light in reality, right? You've always looked at a mock-up that's a facsimile that is a watered down version of the brightness you're used to when looking at a studio light. And the moment we're ahead, we have 7 billion plus people on this planet. We're going to be at, by the time this technology is done, it'll represent 10 billion people or something who have lived during the time of these technologies improving. But like at the end of this, you will have people experiencing that light at 20,000 nits and going, oh, wait, there was a time when people couldn't put on headsets and see reality at 1-to-1 with that, like it's a wildly that's the path we're on, and we're going to go there.
Yeah, I mean, the last thing I want to add is there's also a massive power efficiency thing here. When you want to get to those brightnesses with a TV, because you have to send this across a whole room, and it's a distant display, not a near eye display. You're
Yeah,
using hundreds of watts.
Starboy, no, yes, I've looked at the sun, and you're talking about millions of, you're talking about off the scales. 20,000 nits, though, is the brightness of all indoor lighting. You're not going to get much indoor lighting that's going above that. And if you simulate that, then you can simulate almost all indoor spaces at 1-to-1 what they look like to the actual eye.
Yeah, I mean, look, we both tried headsets at 20,000 nits. The Tiramisu headset I tried here was about 1,200 nits. Looked incredible. It's the combination of contrast. I was stunned by the combination of contrast and brightness in this, so I totally get that people want it. Within a headset where you are confining external light and getting full, true, infinite contrast, you don't really get true infinite contrast if you don't control for external light. It's incredible. And as Ian pointed out, on a flight simulator I tried, you're in a cockpit. When in another headset, these things look like stickers, light stickers, just like that. These look like real physical light points. So look, I very much so love people's appetite for brightness, and we're going to get there eventually.
I'm going to mention the one Valve presenter that was at like a GDC presentation, I want to say 10 years ago now. And they got up there on stage and they described testing an HDR display that had a beach scene on it, and it was so hot on their face they felt the heat of the display enhancing the beach scene of the HDR-ness of it. That we're still a ways away from that, but that's going to be funny when we get there. We need to talk about the final story, right?
Yeah, let's get onto that right now. I think if I can find a good image for you. So the Logitech MX Ink launched for Quest 3 and Quest 3S and Quest 2 about a year ago. Ian has been assessing it for about a week now, as well as the Logitech Muse, which is a very, very similar device, strikingly similar. It's the same thing with a couple of the buttons changed for Apple Vision Pro. Not that Apple or Logitech would ever admit that, but it's very, very clear if you just look at the devices, they're the same thing. So these are tracked styluses / pens for Quest and for Vision Pro. They're not compatible. So you have to, if you have a Quest, you need to get MX Sync. If you have Vision Pro, you need to get Muse, unfortunately, and there's no cross compatibility. And there's various levels of support in the operating systems. There's various levels of support within certain apps. But if you are a Quest owner, for you, this would be a third positionally tracked object for your headset, right? Your two touch controllers, your current tracked objects. This would be a third fully positionally tracked object. And with Vision Pro, it might be your first if you don't have the PSVR 2 controllers. So while I try to find an image here, why don't you tell us about your experience with these styluses / pens / wands in these two operating systems?
Yep. So look for the story soon. It should publish after our video, but it's right near the end here on writing it through. But it's the MX Ink. We'll talk about that first since it came out. Or did you throw up? Yeah. So the MX Ink came out first. I'm holding it in my hand, and it's got a stand-in. Like what I'm seeing visually is a Quest controller. You aren't seeing that. What you're seeing is my hand here, and what you're seeing
we are seeing the Quest controller.
Oh, okay. Sorry,
we're seeing a Quest 1 controller.
All right, so you're seeing a Quest 1 controller, and are you seeing the buttons move on the Quest controller when I press the buttons here?
We're seeing your hand move as like your hand is going out like that. That's what I'm seeing right now is like your hand. Yeah, and now I'm seeing, I'll try to copy with hand tracking.
Yeah. So I'm
Yeah.
pressing the buttons on. Yeah, that helps me actually. I'm pressing the buttons on the MX Ink, and through some kind of compatibility layer, it's actually working here in the studio to at least show some of that to you, even though it's not properly supported. If I go and hit the menu button on the back of the pen, I'll see the actual tracked object here in my hand, and then I'm operating the menu system in Horizon OS as if it's as if this is a laser pointer and I've got a remote control. It's actually really nice to use Horizon OS like that. And it's a fantastic thing because here, if you're seeing the 3D model, you can see how wide and bulky it is. The little pencil can fit in your pocket really conveniently, and then you pull it out, and now you've got like a laser pointer at all your windows, as well as this, flip it up, you've got this pencil to mark on any app. Um, this thing has been out for a year, and the what happened in David's studio here is typical of how all developers are currently supporting this. Uh, Tell me if I'm wrong here, but objectively speaking, when I am using a VR headset, um, my default way of using the VR headset should be, I just put my controllers down, waiting for them to go away. My hand tracking, right? I want to be by default just using this. But a lot of times I want to spend three 3 hours with a pencil in my hand, or 3 hours with a pair of controllers in my hands, or 3 hours with a keyboard under my fingers, or 3 hours with a keyboard under fingers of one hand and a mouse in the other hand as I'm playing another game. And like I just described, what was it, four different modes of input or four different modes in which I'm probably interacting with this computer. And here I am with this pencil, and the pencil essentially breaks the system. Every one of the apps I tried on Horizon OS that use this pen for creativity, the stylus, whatever we want to call it, also wants me to have my Quest 3 controller in the other hand. The painting apps use it as your like palette as you take in the brush over and painting around your brush. You can use it to grab things on the other side of the room that you don't want to grab with the pencil in your hand. But none of the apps on Horizon OS approach it that I could see right now, approach it the way I ideally would want, which is I've got the pencil in this hand, and then I've got my hand tracking in the other. And maybe occasionally I reach forward for my other track controller, or I reach for my mouse or whatever. But by default, I want to be like clicking on the menu systems with my offhand, not having to carry around two tracked objects with me at all times. And then here we are with the Muse just coming out, right? And it's kind of doing the opposite thing. But I don't know if we need to talk about MX Inc. first before we move on. Vermilion
Yeah.
getting mentioned, supporting it in a good way, and that is one of the apps I tried, and it was actually the app that I closed in order to come into the studio today. And when I went inside that app, I had the beautiful uh, the beautiful display area for my painting up with all these handholds that I could grab to pull all this stuff and really position everything around just right. But again, my default here is I want the MX Ink in one hand with a open hand.
Yeah, so just before you get into some more stuff, let's hover on that because I think it's a really good point. So on Horizon OS, this MX Ink stylus, pen, whatever, is treated as a type of controller, like a special controller. So in Horizon OS, how things work by default is that your headset is either in controller tracking mode or hand tracking mode, and you can dynamically toggle between each, right? As Ian showed, you can pick up controllers in any time. As a developer, you specify is your app hands only, controllers only, or hands and controllers. And hands and controllers doesn't mean that you can mix and match, like one hand open and another hand with controllers. It means that the user can switch at any time by just putting their controllers down, and then the headset goes into hand tracking mode. So what Ian's describing is that because that's the way that the system works by default, most apps frustratingly require you to have a touch controller in the other hand for your other functions. You can't, as Ian's saying, have your stylus here and be doing your painting and then adjust your easel or whatever like this. Now, as I say all the time on this podcast, it's one of my favorite rants. you can do what Ian wants. It's called multimodal. It is a feature that developers can do. Here's a screenshot of hand tracking plus controller. Here you go, hand tracking plus controller. This is multimodal in functionality. The problem is that very few developers support this. It's something that they have to kind of actively support. It requires extra time. It's not supported on any other major system. So, this would be Quest only work. I'm still really puzzled as to why developers haven't adopted it more. If you are, I've put out this request before, but if you are a developer who currently has a game or app that really only uses one controller and the hand could be free, tell us in the comments, why don't you use multimodal? And so that's normally something that we talk about, but I think when it comes to this MX Ink stuff, this stylus, this pen, whatever you want to call it, you're absolutely right, Ian, to say that to me, it makes so much sense that instead of this, you would be able to just have just the stylus up and use the other hand. For example, you're talking about Vermilion, which for people unfamiliar is a painting app. You're in a virtual painting studio and painting on a virtual canvas. Why can't you adjust that canvas with your free hand? It doesn't make sense to have to hold a whole controller in your hand. You're right, but it just comes down to this architecture. And so why don't you then, unless you want to say something else about MX Ink, why don't you tell us about how it's different on Vision OS with Logitech Muse if you want?
So Afro was asking about Walkabout, and if it's multimodal, no, it's not. They're one controller only, no hand support. But if you look in their latest features, like things like the Live camera, they're calling it Coco Vision, I think was the name of it. That's a camera when you when you activate that on the menu system, you get this little Live camera that's floating in space, and there's these very obvious handholds on the device where you could start in some future iteration, imagine grabbing it with your offhand and having your putter in the other hand, but that's not there yet. So we're going to talk about the Muse first. And so the Muse is brand new, just out, and it's also from Logitech. So both of these pencils, pens, styluses are about I think it's $30 for both headsets. So you go get the MX Ink for the Quest 3, and it's $130. Get the Muse for the Vision Pro, about $130. The buttons on each are slightly different, but the Muse, what Apple has done is given you an operating system, given all developers an operating system that by default uses gaze pinch as its interface. So you look at something you want, you grab it, pull it over. It's that simple. That's the entire operating system. Now, within the last 2 months, they've added PlayStation VR 2 controller support, as well as this Logitech stylus support for the Muse. I just downloaded an app this morning. Might have downloaded it last night, but actually opened it this morning, and it was called, I'm gonna butcher its name offhand, but it was for circuits and for learning how circuits work and for soldering circuits together. I pull the Muse pen out. I'm using it in my left hand, and I connected the PlayStation VR 2 controller in my right hand to the Vision Pro. And I had a soldering iron in my left hand and this PlayStation VR 2 controller in my right hand in a Vision Pro is also a soldering iron. The app is glitched out and is giving me 2 soldering irons because I've connected 2 spatial controllers on the first day of availability where I'm doing this. But it's already kind of a better situation than what was happening in Quest, because I could put the second soldering iron down and I've got my hand and I'm trying to do this. But this is the right model with devs that are also figuring out how to use this in real time, what to do. And David, it's weird here, right? Like, we're talking about I just described 2 third-party controllers from 2 different companies compatible with the Apple ecosystem, and that is not the model in the mind for a lot of people on how Apple works with other companies, right?
Yeah, we're definitely in a very different era of Apple than the Apple of maybe 10 years ago, for example. There is a stark change to see this. To be fair, they have partnered with Logitech on things like the Logitech Crayon for iPad, but to have it as kind of the official system instead of an Apple spatial pencil or something does show that they are leaning on more partnerships now, on more collaboration. I mean, we're in an era of Apple where you can get Apple Music on Android and Apple TV on Android and such. So this is a different company, but yeah, I think that's a very funny image to have of you with both types of controllers that are supported on Vision OS, the PlayStation VR2 and the Muse, and figuring out. I don't think there are very few people who I think would actually even think to try to use those two together. I think you may be one of the only people in the world who's probably used those two at the exact same time in a Vision Pro so far.
Yeah, it's like it's hysterical. You go back 10 years and I'm looking on Oculus Share or whatever it is, the Reddit thread that I'm looking at on our Oculus, and this dev is like, I just made a VR app. Does anyone want to test it? I'm like, okay, yeah, you can send me that zip file. I'll install that zip file straight to my PC from a stranger on the internet. What the heck on my DK2 here. And then you get into a conversation with this person. They're like, I don't have a headset to test on. You're going to be the first person to test this in a headset. And it's like, right on, let's do it. And then I went and slept in my, like I hurt myself. I hurt my brain and my eyes so bad by doing that I had to go lay down for 45 minutes and gave myself sim sickness. It's still sort of the same thing today. How many devs have access to every one of these hardware accessories to test in every single consideration?
Yeah, I mean, we are still so early when it comes to Vision OS. It's only, on its third major version. There will be a time where people buy Apple Vision Airs and Apple Vision whatever headsets, and you tell them back in my day you couldn't even connect a track controller or a stylus or anything like this. It didn't exist. And they say, well, I didn't realize that. Just like, back in my day, you couldn't even copy and paste on the iPhone or whatever. So devs are still learning out how to work with this. We keep saying MX Sync on Quest is a year ago. A year is not even that much time. One of the problems you ran into is more fundamental, I think, where there was an app where you were ready to use your MX Ink, right? You had started kind of naively, and I don't mean that in a bad way, but just with your MX Ink in your hand, ready to go. And then you realized not only did you need to go and pick up another controller, but you actually needed to use the touch controllers for the tutorial, because the developer
Yeah,
never thought, what if someone buys this app and has just the stylus and is trying to use it? The tutorial is designed for controllers. Yeah.
it's very. Thank you. I appreciate you bringing that up, and we needed to discuss that because, like, I mean, I think we've had the pencil probably around for a while, and we as journalists always struggle with how quickly should we be reviewing this. Everyone else has this in their hands. They're considering it. Our viewers want to know, is this worth buying? But in many cases, we have to like assess not just its day one potential, but what is this going to look like a year from now? And we don't necessarily let the way it operates today affect the review that we write today. But in many cases, like, now isn't the right time to assess this. We're actually going to need to punt this away 3 or 4 months to let the software ecosystem develop so that we can actually explain, oh, this is actually good.
Do you know what
Back
I'm
in
just
my day,
thinking?
we had to use our bare hands. Yeah.
Our last topic, the competition. Meta said that, you don't just have to enter a new app, you could also do a significant update that adds a new modality. I'm pretty sure adding Logitech MX Ink support to your app would be a good idea. So if you're a developer in this audience and you want to spend the next 4 weeks, entering this competition, and you're wondering, what is my idea? What big update should I do for my app to enter? Add MX Ink support. And when you do it, enable multimodal. Let the person have their hand tracking hand in the other hand. If you're a developer that listening to this right now and you already have MX Sync support in your app, but it's not multimodal, enable multimodal. It's Look, I hesitate to say that anything's easy. I know as a developer that things that seem easy can be staggeringly hard. You have to test a bunch of stuff, but it's fundamentally not that difficult to enable multimodal support. Please don't shoot me. It's not crazy. Now, obviously, when it comes to testing every possible scenario in your app and how does this break existing systems, of course. But look, if you want to try and win, a $50,000 prize or whatever, there's an idea from UploadVR to you. And add this pencil support and do it right.
Yeah, Caleb is saying that's a great use case and that would work for the competition. So I would love to see wider, better support, the multimodal stuff that I need. And we need better support in both systems for this across the board. And I'm seeing people ask about heaviness, and yes, I've dropped both pens on the ground a couple times. I'm ready to carry the Muse pen with me around as I'm using the Vision Pro. I think I think what David, the thing I had to bring up about,
Wait,
sorry, go ahead.
just do you have a slot for it in your Belkin bag? The Muse.
Yes, I do. Yeah, it's
Okay,
going straight into my Belkin bag. And
that's all I wanted to ask.
well, like I'm looking at my Belkin bag, going, can I hang the PlayStation VR2 controllers off the side of the Belkin bag so that I've got like these trinkets that are always clanging around the outside of my bag, and those are my controllers because I don't have access. I'm not going to get the Surreal Touch ones because they're not quite access. They don't have the same system level uh, access. There was something specific I wanted to talk to you about dev support. You know what it is? It's every app I tried for this seemed like it came from an earlier generation where they had to support controllers by default and then optionally this one other thing. And I just want to speak for devs out there that like we recognize, and I think it's looking like Meta recognizes that you need more money to justify taking your apps to the next stages that we really need to like make this a really effective system across the board, right? Exactly what I described. Your pen is there and it's with you through every single app or through multiple apps. And what David was describing, every app that I tried from a year ago that was architected for this thing pre-launch was like, you got to spend 25 minutes here learning every single tool within our ecosystem because understandably Shapes XR and all of these apps are incredibly complex apps. You can do a lot with them, frame by frame animation or prototyping apps. You can do a heck of a lot. So like you understand why they want to put you in a flow where they're teaching you these two controllers as you go. But like, man, you need to assume people came here with your hands, right? Like that's at the end of the day, like and we need a lot of apps paid to make that transition. Like they're struggling out there. They need money coming in to fund that extra dev work.
Yeah, I strongly agree with what you're saying, especially, look, we don't know what Meta's next headset will ship within the box, but I think there's a strong possibility that it does not have the touch controllers in the box. We're talking about that $1,000-ish headset focused on a seated experience with an ultralight design and a tethered compute puck. We think that probably won't have the controllers in the box, though again we're uncertain. I don't think Meta's probably even made that decision yet. But so if you are a developer, you should be thinking about a world where not everyone does have a controller, and maybe they get the headset plus the MX Ink. And as Ian said, yeah, you absolutely do need to be able to support the use case that they do not have a touch controller there. And the image we have on here is ironic because we keep saying that this shouldn't be the only way to use these apps.
I guess I should mention here, as I see some people talking about how more devs should control one-handed input just as an accessibility feature. Yeah, that's one of the reasons I go on and on about Walkabout is because I adore one-handed design. Like Beat Saber had to go and add, I think, one-handed mode quite a bit after release. And there was just the other discussion here of, where was it? Yeah, Barr saying it's a shame it wouldn't count, but it would be nice if more game makers added the ability to just use one controller in their games. So Thrasher has support for the MX Ink. So if you have an MX Ink pen stylus, go and buy Thrasher for the Quest, assuming, go get Thrasher for your Quest with your MX Ink and try the MX Ink with Thrasher and tell me what you think. It almost feels like the best way to play that game, which is wild to be flicking around your thrashing little worm over there on the wall. But I went into Maestro, and Maestro had a broken sort of integration here. It used the stylus as a stand-in for my hand. So like I'm moving the stylus in place of moving my hand, and it's not right. So I would love to see more Harry Potter or any Magic game is a match made in heaven for either of these tools, and I want to see that happen.
I think when it comes to games, a lot of this comes down to, it's obviously going to be a vanishingly small amount of their audience that do get a $130 stylus that isn't included in the headset. At the same time, though, I agree with you. It is great. So as well as we obviously talk about creativity apps being the primary use case for these devices, these styluses, as well as that, you're saying there could be some games. But the third use case I saw someone in our audience mention is using it for custom tracked objects. There was someone talking about they had it on a fire extinguisher. The example that Golf Plus has tested, and this isn't something they've shipped, is putting it on a golf club to track your real golf club. You can see it here. So that is kind of one of the advantages. We often talk on this show about how one of the best advantages of the Pico ecosystem from ByteDance is that they have those Pico trackers, those little kind of, circular lightweight pucks. They're less than 30 grams, and they are basically like if you took a touch controller and got rid of the buttons and sticks and triggers, that's pretty much what you get with a Pico tracker. And you can do tracked objects. In the Meta ecosystem, there is no Meta tracker, but the MX Ink is kind of the nearest thing. It's smaller than a touch controller. It's obviously more compact. It's a lot lighter. So that is the person in the audience who was mentioning using this. Please repeat yourself, because I slightly missed the context here. But I saw someone in the audience saying they're using it, I think, to track a fire extinguisher. And yeah, so if you're building an enterprise application, this can be a very cool use case. Or if you're building any app that could potentially use one of the consumer's home objects, you could use it.
Pixel out there saying the SDK for the Logitech pen has been a bit of a pain to work getting Unity 6.0 onwards, and they're still using 23.3. Yeah, I could understand that being a big issue, and we will be on the lookout for devs. That's basically when I get my write-up out here very soon after I get some video and just make one more pass through it. We're basically doing, I'm going to say the same thing here that I'll say in the article. If you're doing something interesting, or you're using the MX Ink or the Muse for your artwork, or if you're on the dev side of things trying to create something new with either of these tools, you really do reach out to us. We would love to hear about what you're doing, with the kind of artwork you're able to make, because on the artist side of things, if you're able to use this tool to make artwork in VR, you're very valuable at showing to the rest of the world why a VR headset is useful for your work. So we need to get more of those stories out in front of our audience, and we need you to tell us about those interesting use cases as they come up. Right now, I'm seeing a very splintered ecosystem that has some really, really cool ideas, but we need to hear about the best implementations and the people that are pushing this to the next level.
Yeah, I see Pixel Rig XR has replied that it is a fire extinguisher. They have a mixed reality app where they're attaching an MX Ink to the end of the fire extinguisher to track it. Really cool. Great application. I see Games TT9HU saying that the tracking isn't good enough for some of use cases. Yeah, I think the tracking itself isn't bad, but the issue I've heard that is the problem with the MX Ink, which sounds very fixable in software, is that if you keep it perfectly still, maybe you can confirm this, Ian, if you keep it perfectly still for 10 seconds, apparently it goes into tracking sleep mode. So it will stop tracking and then you have to move it again. So that seems like a solvable software design flaw, and I'm very shocked that that's not a solution. Ian, have you noticed this, and does it happen on Muse as well, or what's the situation there? Or maybe you haven't checked yet?
Yeah, I need to look at them both more. I have had sort of auto sleep, or them going off, like turning off on me, being an issue. But you just watched it here. I put the Muse down at the beginning of our show, or not the Muse. I put the MX Ink down at the beginning of our show, and then while inside VR, I reached for it and returned it on from sleep mode. So that was actually that was preferred. That was the preferred way it should function. The idea that it goes to sleep really quickly while I'm using it for an hour and a half, I haven't tested that yet. But I will need to keep an eye on that one. And I'm appreciating these comments from people who are clearly very familiar with the ink, have used it extensively. You're the type of person I want to hear from and understand what kind of artworks you're actually making with the skill you're bringing into VR combined with the precision input. It's really neat to have. It's just, you say that tracking's okay, but Thrasher, right? If you're using a track controller, it's going to be a completely different experience. Every one of these apps, one of the apps, Vermilion, you can bring everything over the canvas over to you so far, where you bring it up into just the right spot, and then you prop your arm up on like the arm of your chair, and then you've got a nice little aid. You're not tiring yourself out so much to like lean in an odd direction. Those are fantastic features to combine with this. And I'm sure artists have been painting for 6-8 hours. I'm not putting in that amount of time
Mm.
to test whether these artworks are really up to snuff, but like, or these art tools are really up to snuff. I need to hear from more people in the audience. And all I've heard is from a couple artists out there who are like, in theory, this is the killer device, but in practice, I'm just not using it that much. And I want to hear from people who are on the other side of that, who are using it like crazy.
Yeah, please do tell us. That would be great. A few points I want to bring up for people who aren't familiar with this, some cool things that we should just mention. So that on both the MX Ink and the Muse, the top is a button. So in the same way you kind of like click in a pen, and my understanding is that that's how you bring up like the meta button. It's the equivalent of the meta button to bring up your menu. The other cool thing is that this tip is pressure sensitive. So there are multiple apps that let you draw on a physical surface, like a table. This can actually be used like a traditional 2D stylus like that. So this is not just for 3D in space application, it's also for that. And the other thing I saw someone discuss in the comments, does the Apple one, the Logitech Muse, support the Inkwell dock? So if you're not familiar with that, the MX Ink and Muse are $130, but you can also get the MX Ink for Quest with this dock, charging dock that you can see on screen now. And the answer is no. This is only for the MX Ink for Quest. Look, I guess we should also say in an ideal world, you would not need to have two separate, weirdly differently named devices that are definitely not just the same thing in a trench coat, and they should work between headsets. That's not where we are today.
I heard someone, I think it was someone in our comments on the Galaxy XR write up saying, please check out if it works with a Wacom tablet. See if you can hook up, you can wire in a Wacom tablet to the USB port on a Galaxy XR. And it's like, I like David going, oh, and I didn't even think in my 4 days of testing of whether that would be a use case. But of course that's a use case, right? That makes perfect sense that someone would bring their own touch sensitive tablet so they could do artwork on a VR headset. Like that's an even better solution. Anyways, we will be watching all sorts of things, and the Muse, like I talked about some of the craziest situation with the Muse. The Muse works in the Notes app and Freeform bundled apps inside of Vision Pro, and so I'm just going there and I'm sketching out things I'm seeing straight onto a canvas floating in space, and it feels more precise, or as precise at least as Tilt Brush in all these apps I've used over the years. Anyways, we will keep covering these tools, and I'm just going to repeat again, reach out to us if you're doing anything interesting with the Muse, with the PSVR 2 controllers, or with the MX Ink, especially if you're doing multimodal on the Quest ecosystem where you've got hand tracking in one hand and the MX Ink in the other. We need to kind of highlight some of those apps because I think more devs need to know that that's possible. Anything else, David?
No, I just think it's interesting that we often talk about, hand tracking versus controllers, and now we're having this discussion about, well, what we keep calling controllers is only one possible form of controllers. They're really gaming controllers. Sure, they have other use cases, but fundamentally, these things were derived from getting an Xbox 360 controller and splitting it in half. And we're seeing here that if you do want to design for different use cases, there are a bunch of possibilities, and I think we'll see more custom use case controllers come out over time, especially with the way that Apple is supporting this in Vision OS in a kind of generic sense.
Yeah, I love David's breakdown there. Yeah, you think about Beat Saber, the defining game that actually reached outside of the VR market, and people who aren't in VR know Beat Saber is a game and exists, right? You don't use the inputs on those controllers. All you're using is the fact that the controllers can be tracked in space really quickly, and that you are making a gripping motion with your hand, right? Like that's the only thing that matters for Beat Saber. And here you've got these MX Inks, which all theoretically they're Saber-like, but you're not going to use them in the same way. The tracking isn't built for that. It's not the same thing. And you know, in between both of those things, there are magic games that that could be built that use these things for input. But are you going to have big swishy motions, or are you going to have very specific motions right in front of the camera? And these are all design ideas that devs are going to have to figure out in the years ahead. But like, I think people are going to make them. I think there will be really cool ideas. And right now, the people are already starting to do the really cool art things with this stuff.
Yeah, I mean, look, it's slightly tangential, but I do think that there is such a massive opportunity one day for an amazing VR Harry Potter game that leverages maybe controllers by default, maybe a stylus support, maybe you can just pick up a stick by then and have custom object tracking. But the combination of that and on-device speech recognition just seems like it's, and it's so,
Waltz of the Wizard is already
yeah,
there, right? Go, go, go. If you're gonna go make a Harry Potter game, go take the team that made the flat screen Harry Potter game, and you give them Alden Dynamics, right? Like you take Alden Dynamics and you gave them a blank check to go work with the Harry Potter IP people and say, we know how to make great VR games. We know how to use natural interactions in this way. Listen to us as you adopt your property for VR. But like the economics that I just described are do not exist, right? Like there should be geniuses at these companies with vision for putting these two teams together to make this thing happen for headsets 3 years from now. But we don't have a lot of confidence that that's actually going to happen, do we, David?
we'll have to see. We will have to see.
All
Yeah,
right.
this is
This
a
has
great
been a great
discussion today.
show. Yeah,
Yep.
I thank you to our commenters. You are fundamental here. This was our last topic. Yeah, so we covered everything. To our time travelers getting to us at the end of the show, to our audio listeners, thank you for listening to us. We hope you have a great time in VR, and we will see you in the future. We've got a crazy, crazy period ahead of us as we move into 2026. So stay tuned. We'll see you in the future.
Thanks so much, everyone. We'll see you in the future.